my dad would pull it out with a claw hammer. I mean, World War II era guys. I wanted Hellboy to be one of those guys, but when I'm writing him, it's what would I say. And the first story where I used Kate Corrigan, which is the first time I needed to do a story with a completely different voice from Hellboy, it was entirely, what would my wife say? If I said this stupid thing, she'd say this thing. So, and the different voices are tricky. Sometimes I will model, like, I've got an Irish character in Hellboy, this woman that Hellboy's hanging out with right now. I had to pull out a couple films and listen to some different things and kind of say, oh, I want the rhythm of her dialogue. But they're not really based on real people.
Back to Mike.
I just wanted to know what provided the catalyst for the creation of BPRD, just like making it like a separate comic book. What really drove you to do that?
Well, probably after Conquer Worm, but even before that, I mean, it became very clear that my interest was Hellboy. It always was. I don't know why I started out with the idea of doing a teen book. And in fact, actually when I started, it was going to be called blah, blah, blah. It was to be the name of a teen, but I couldn't come up with the name of a teen. So the only name I'd ever come up with that I liked was Hellboy. So I said, well, okay, we'll just call it Hellboy and then we'll put these other guys in there. And it became clear that I had things I'd like to do with those characters, but there was never going to be room for them in the book. So it started as an experiment. Can we see if these characters can have their own book? Little by little, I realized how much potential there was for those characters, but I just physically couldn't do it. And so then, once it worked, once we were able to do a book, then the thing snowballed, because suddenly, between John Arcudi and myself, suddenly it's like, oh, wait a minute, now I realize how much stuff there is here. So yeah, it was just a product of the comic focusing on Hellboy.
Are you worried that, like Hellboy, someone might take over the book, like a certain character might, provide so much story that he or she might become a focus of the book? Or?
I don't think so, because I think it's such a rich book, and we're messing with these characters in horrific ways, as you'll see in the coming months. It does seem that one character will get, if not killed off, certainly characters. You get to a point where you go, we got to put this guy away for a while because they're so badly damaged. This guy's got to rest, and there's a real organic feel to this thing of, well, then who would step in? And John Arcudi is such a great character writer. My involvement more and more in BPRD is a general world view. What if we do this to the world? What if we do this to this group of guys? And then John is amazing at saying, I'll say, we drop this bomb on them. And then John goes in there and says, and this is what it would do to them as people. So it's kind of like I just hand him a problem and he shows me what it does to these guys.
Thank you.
Sure.
See, I gather from what you were talking about earlier, you've been in the mainstream as well as doing your own work, and I gather that doing your own is much more rewarding. But do you find yourself wishing you could jump back into the mainstream for a certain book or a certain character, or work with a certain company, anything like that?
No, I used to get that question a lot, and I don't get that question very much anymore. But no, I was in mainstream comics for 10 years. And there's nothing I miss. Most of the characters I grew up reading that I would be excited about drawing, they don't exist anymore. They've changed so much that I look at Iron Man and I go, to me that's not Iron Man. I look at Thor, to me that's not Thor. I was never really a very good superhero artist, so there's a few characters that'd be fun to draw once. If some great old Jack Kirby character that I've never drawn, if Marvel called up, And they did a few years back. They said, do you want to do a Thor cover? It's Thor fighting the Absorbing Man. And I went, ooh, I've never drawn the Absorbing Man. So I did that cover. But beyond that, as far as doing the story, no, there's nothing.
I was wondering what your take is on the popularity of the character Lobster Johnson and what direction that be taken with him in the future.
Yeah, the whole popularity of Lobster Johnson is funny because I suspect the character is very popular because nobody knows anything about him. And as we start to do more stuff with him in both BPRD and a new Lobster Johnson book we've got planned, I hope people, when they find out something about him, go, oh, never mind. So the trick is, it's a very strange thing to do books that focus on a character and still say, well, we can't know anything about him. The real strange thing is a friend of mine, Tom Snagosky, has just written a Lobster Johnson novel. And I said, you can't explain who he is. And I can't tell you anything about any of the supporting characters because John Arcudi is using those characters in a Lobster Johnson miniseries. But he hasn't written a Lobster Johnson miniseries. But they're all basically his characters to define. So good luck writing that novel. You may want to add an extra character so that there's at least one character you can explain who they are. But he's just so much fun. And what we're doing with Lobster Johnson in the future, me being me and starting in the wrong place usually, I did a Lobster Johnson miniseries that takes place about a year and a half before he's killed. Instead of saying, hey, what if we did it at the beginning of his career? So the second Lobster Johnson series is sort of Lobster Johnson year one. And little by little, I don't know how much we'll explain the character, but we will see when Lobster Johnson was new. And the whole focus is, who is this guy? Gangsters are showing up dead, this burn mark on their forehead. Who is this guy? So the trick is to keep this character mysterious and cool and crazy without, turning him into too much of a three-dimensional character.
Hi there.
Hi.
I was wondering, in the book series, Unnatural Selection, Bones of Giants, and some of the Odd Tales, they mention a woman named Anastasia Bransfield. And I was wondering if that was a part of the mainstream comic series that you invented, or whether that was something solely devised for the chapter books and the odd jobs, and if we ever see Anastasia in your style.
Well, we do see her, I illustrated one of the novels, so we did get to see her. That is the one crossover between the novels and the comics. Though she's never appeared in the comic, there is a mention of her in the Abe Sapien miniseries, or I don't even know if we mentioned her by name, but there's a mention in the Abe Sapien miniseries, The Drowning, that Hellboy is off with this girl. So that is him with Anastasia. Chris Golden created her for the first Hellboy novel, and we kind of just agreed that, yeah, it's cool that Hellboy had a relationship. It lasted X amount of time. It fell apart. But it's kind of a chunk of Hellboy's history that I gave to Chris. And we're planning on doing a miniseries at some point that's set during that time. So Chris and I will write it together, and we'll see Hellboy in that relationship. Especially now that he's sort of, a relationship is sort of developing in Hellboy, it might be interesting to go back and see what this previous relationship was like. But I mean, that's where the Hellboy Companion was a lot of fun to do, because we got to take all these stray bits and expand them a little and kind of get a sense of, the arc of this guy's life. Yes?
I had a question for you. A lot of the monsters in Hellboy have kind of Lovecraftian elements to them. Was H.P. Lovecraft kind of a big influence for you for some of the monsters in Hellboy? Or?
Yeah, I mean, it was a big inspiration. One thing I didn't want to do was, use the Lovecraft mythology. I wanted to make up my own mythology, but that the similarity is that gigantic universe, the big unknowable universe. But the Hellboy mythology is based on reading several different mythologies, the creation myths of several different cultures, finding things that were similar and kind of mixing them together. You know,